So get ready, because here's what the Rebbe explained. And this spoke to me very deeply. He spoke of the distinction between the two different altars within the tabernacle and how those altars, parallel the altars within our own soul. So the first thing he pointed out clearly is, it's one of Chabad's core philosophies, is that there's nothing that can render these altars ritually unclean or impure, right? That at the core they were wood. Wood is not makabel tuma. Wood does not receive ritual impurity. And therefore, the soul of a Jew, no matter how low we go, no matter how low any of us goes, our soul is always connected to God. And there's nothing that can defile or destroy that deepest part of our souls. No matter how low we go, how low we stoop, we are never lost to the dark side. There's always hope. And it was the Rebbe's mission and Chabad's mission, and you see it happening today around the world, that he and his disciples scoured the ends of the earth to find those souls and to polish them and to raise them up. And while the physical tabernacle temple can be destroyed, the tabernacle temple within us, I'll just say tabernacle for now because that's what we're talking about, the tabernacle within us cannot be destroyed. And the service within our own souls, the Rebbe explained, are really parallel the service in the tabernacle in every single respect. Okay, and so just as in the tabernacle, there was the inner altar, which was within the sanctuary itself, and an outer altar, which was larger and in the courtyard of the sanctuary, we have two altars within us. So let's look at the tabernacle again. Oh, it's so distant, it's so far. It really doesn't, it's hard to make sense of it. Okay, but you can see there are two altars. And as the Rebbe explains, the altar represents, what is the altar in the Mizbeach? What does it represent? Our efforts to approach God, to approach the divine, to come close to Hashem, to offer something, anything to the creator of the universe that definitionally has everything. And so these are the two altars within each and every one of us that we have within our souls. So in the tabernacle, the outer altar, the bigger one and the more public one, was where the animal sacrifices were offered, right? And it got intense there. There was blood and flesh and meats, and you would cut off the tail and the head and the fats. It was intense, right? And that is the altar within ourselves where we sacrifice the animal within us. And so let's just talk about that for 1 second. I know we're running short on time, but this is really important, particularly in this generation that we're living in, because there have been many friends that have turned to me with their challenges that echo my own, challenges of the body, certain appetites and desires and lusts and whatever. And we all have a physical body. We all have that bodily spirit within us. It's called the nefesh. It attaches to the physical body. And if we claim that we haven't experienced some sort of bodily desire that was probably not permitted, we'd be lying. And remember, we're not Catholic priests here who reject the physical body and its desires. That rarely turns out well. That never turns out well. We simply harness them. We control them so that they can manifest themselves in a holy way, in a sanctified context, and not where they control us and are satisfied in a debased and animalistic and ungodly way, God forbid. And so my experience is that when I do have a forbidden craving or desire, I try to bring that desire onto the altar within my heart. I visualize it. I try to feel it within, and I try to sacrifice it there. And that unfulfilled desire, that sort of yearning, that thing, that is the sacrifice to Hashem. And that is what I think a real sacrifice is, at least on some level. What is a sacrifice? It's when something matters to you, right? Something that is difficult for you, something that you want. And instead of using your own selfish, self-satisfying purposes, instead you offer it to Hashem. And that pain that we feel by not succumbing to that desire, at least in my heart and in my experience, that pain is the fire itself, which Hashem consumes the sacrifice and elevates it and accepts it. And this message is so important, particularly today, in our time specifically. In the West, when giving into every and any desire is considered a virtue. And often the more depraved the desire, the more virtuous it's considered, to the degree where teachers in schools are actually encouraging young kids in school to be transgender. It's just so sick and so crazy. And this is truly the antithesis of Torah values, right? The Torah is given to guide us, not only in how to truly enjoy the pleasures of this world, but to how to elevate them and harness them as tools that we could use to come closer to Hashem. So another way people sublimate the physical to come close to God is through voluntary fasting. A number of you have actually reached out to me this week about various things that are happening that you're fasting about. I know a lot of you are familiar with that. Jews actually, interestingly, tend to do that less, this voluntary fasting I've seen than Christians and non-Jews, but there's nothing against it, but maybe we just have so many fast days we don't want to add any to it. But anyways, there was a 4th century sage named Rav Sheshet, and whenever he fasted, he would add the following request during his prayers. He would say, Master of the universe, you know that when the temple stood, a person who sinned would bring a sacrifice. Although only the fats and the bloods would be offered on the altar, the person would be granted atonement. Now I have fasted, and my fat and my blood have diminished. May it be your will that the decrease in my fat and my blood should be considered as if I offered them on the altar, and my offering was accepted. So that's like a beautiful take on it, a beautiful perspective, but just at the very simplest, right? We are denying and controlling the physical body and allowing our intellect, right? The Aron Kodesh within our minds to be in charge. Okay, so the outer altar is where the korbanot were offered. Korban, of course, is for sacrifice, which means to come close, because we were able to come close to Hashem through those sacrifices. So that was the outer altar, but then there was the smaller, more personal altar within the sanctuary itself. And this was the altar of the incense. This altar forged a deeper bond between us and Hashem, even than the outer altar. Actually, it was called the Mizbeach Ketoret, the altar of the Ketoret. And the Rebbe points out that the word Ketoret comes from the word Keter, with the tet, not a taf. With the taf, it means crown. Tet, it means a bond. And that altar is less about the sacrifices of the flesh and more about that deeper internal work, right? Our fears and our jealousies, our ego, right? That is the altar upon which we sacrifice our ego. So, when we sacrifice our ego, the things that we want for ourselves, when we sublimate them to what Hashem wants from us, which is what? What is it that Hashem wants from us? Really, whatever is happening to us, particularly that thing we're resisting the most. However painful what we are going through may be, and believe me, I know the depth of pain of the challenges that so many of you are facing right now. I know because many of you tell me, right? You send me prayer requests, you share with me, you talk to me. It's a privilege which I'm so grateful for, and I'm honored to be able to pray for all of you. And so, as we said, what we sacrifice on that altar is our ego. We sacrifice the image that we all have about the way we think our lives should look, and we lovingly and we wholeheartedly accept the way things are, right? Embracing the truth that Hashem knows best for us and what's good for us. And so those sacrifices, the sacrifices of our anger, of our expectation, of our selfishness, those are the most intimate and fragrant aromas for Hashem. And those usually those are the ones that happen deep within our own sanctuary, deep within our private experience that we share with no one other than Hashem himself. And that's what the sages explain is really actually the essence of fragrance, right? Fragrance is something that benefits the soul. It's not about the yearnings of the body. So the outer altar is that which we draw close to Hashem from a body perspective, and the inner altar, the Mizbeach of the Ketoret, is where we draw close with our souls. As the masks are coming off and much of the world is turning not only against Israel, but yes, against the Jewish people, if you feel different, if your love for Israel is growing deeper
and stronger. If you're thirsting to cleave to the nation of Israel and to the God of Israel, if you're thirsting to learn authentic Torah from Jews in Judea, then the Land of Israel Fellowship is for you. Hundreds of individuals and families from around the world come together on Zoom every week in what can only be described as a fellowship of love, friendship, of learning and praying and belonging. A fellowship really unlike any other. It's more than just a movement, it's a family. To learn more about the Land of Israel Fellowship, click on www.thelandofisrael.com/fellowship or send an email to fellowship@thelandofisrael.com. Love and blessings from Judea.